Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Hillary Dickman. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admission for Marketing and Communications at Colorado College, and I'm also a parent of 2 college students.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, we have 2 questions from listeners. We have an anonymous question from a listener that Hillary and I are going to answer about how is AI being used in admissions these days. So Hillary will join me for that. Barry from New Jersey has a question about dual enrollment. And Susan and I will answer that. And for our college spotlight, Nate Haveman, the VP of Enrollment at Hope College, continues to help us understand Hope College.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Hillary, let's play an anonymous question that a lot of people are asking a lot about these days.
I have a question about AI being used in college admissions. I recently came from a presentation where the presenter talked about AI tools are being used for application screening, the interview process, and decision support. For example, they said that AI tools are employed to efficiently review and analyze application materials, such as transcript, recommendation letters, and personal essays, helping admissions officers manage their large volumes of applications. He also said some institutions utilize AI-powered chatbots to conduct preliminary interviews or to transcribe and analyze interviews with applicants, aiming to streamline the evaluation process. And he also said that AI models assist in predicting applicant success by analyzing various data points, thereby supporting admissions decisions and potentially reducing reliance on standardized test scores. I've heard you say in the past, and many of your guests say that they do not do this at all, but apparently some people say that it does happen. Can you speak to this and how it might be used in admissions from what you understand how it works? Thank you.
Tell me what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, this is such a great question. I know it's something that a lot of people are thinking about. There are definitely some schools who are using AI to help them with their admission reviews. It's been at least a year since I heard a rep from MIT talking about the ways that they were using AI. Really makes sense for a school like MIT because their whole thing is about like using new technologies, right? So I don't know how widespread that is. I feel like this is something I'm going to hear more about as I go on spring travel, leaving in mid-April, and we'll be at a lot of fairs with other reps. I think this is something that we will be talking about, and I'll have a better feel for it after that. But certainly there are some schools that are doing it. Schools like CC, we are not on the cutting edge of file review. We aren't using any AI in our file review. The most that we use AI at CC in the admission office is for like brainstorming and writing emails to students. So we're not using it all in review. I think that there are ways in which AI could be used well in file review. I think that we will get there eventually in our office once other schools have sort of ironed out all the kinks. I think it would be really helpful for reading transcripts. Like we have a lot of human power. There are probably 4 or 5 people in our office who are full-time transcript evaluators. And if you're reading a transcript that is really straightforward, like a public school that has an AP or IB curriculum, like you don't really need a human to review that transcript. That should be done by AI because that frees us up to do the more important work of understanding students. So I think that I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we should be fearful of it. One thing that I have heard from reps who are using AI is how cautious they're being with it, and that they're double checking everything, and that it's a way for them to narrow down the pool so that they can better use the time and manpower that they have to do the really important work. And even if that is, reviewing essays, there are some times when I have read a whole essay and I'm having a hard time understanding it, and I will copy and paste it into ChatGPT and say, can you give me a summary of this? Because I'm not understanding what the student is trying to say. And that actually that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it can be really helpful for me, because sometimes I can't tell if the essay is poorly written or if I'm just tired and I want another person in addition to my partner who I'm going to be reviewing that app with to, not a person, I guess it's a computer, but I want another look at it, right? So that my partner and I can talk about it and say, well, what about this? Does that make sense? Did we miss that? Once in a while, I'll read an essay and say, I don't know if I'm not smart enough to understand this essay or if it's poorly written. And so having another human set of eyes and having, I can see how having sort of an AI backup on that would also be helpful. And having that as part of the process would be lovely rather than just using it once in a while.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. They're all over the place. One is this space is changing so quickly and so rapidly. I had Andy Borst, who's over the office at UGA, on our podcast 12 or 14 months ago. And I usually ask guests what they want to talk about. So he said he wants to talk about this topic. And he'd been really outspoken on social media, sort of shooting down this notion that AI was being used to make admissions decisions. He's been very outspoken on that. And he pretty much said, I don't know anybody doing that. Now, I have an interview in 2 days with the vice provost of enrollment. And I asked that person in the brainstorming session, is there any topics that you want to talk about? And the individual says how we use AI in file reading. So that's a change in a year. But so I think so that's an important point. Things are changing because Andy said, I don't know anybody doing this. And he's very well connected and networked. So that's a year ago. So there's been a lot of change in the last 12 months. Now, another thing that's really important, and Andy brought this up in the interview, a lot of what people are calling AI is not AI. It's like using artificial intelligence, machine learning to do some sorting of your files in your applicant pool so that you're more efficient.
Yeah.
That is, a lot of people don't think of that as AI, or if they do use AI that way and they say they use AI, what I hear from families is robots are making decisions.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening anywhere.
Yes, and I don't know of anybody doing that.
No.
I think they're using it to increase efficiency and to do some of the stuff you said, like transcript reviews and that kind of thing.
I think one thing that is helpful to think about is how much almost every school's pool of applicants has grown over the last 10 years, but that lots of us still have the same admission budget as we had 10 years ago, right? Or at least 5 years ago. Our budget hasn't changed since COVID, but we have more applications to review. And so I think of at some point in the future, when we have the opportunity in our office to use AI in a consistent way to help us with sorting, that is going to help us manage the number of applications that we're reading without shortchanging the students who we're reading. It's hard to get through the number of applications that offices have to get through without some kind of help, because there are so many more than there used to be, and not that many more people reading, and not that much more money to hire people, right? So as a parent, knowing that these are being used cautiously and that there is still a human in there. And in fact, that there are times when I think AI makes fewer mistakes than a human reading a transcript. You I would welcome it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Not to make decisions, but to help with sorting so that the human brain can do what the human brain does best. And that's getting to know individuals on a human level.
Yeah, we almost took the question from a listener. It was a big article on UNC when it came out that they were using Slate has that built-in reader into their system now, and they were using it to do some evaluation of writing, more from a form standpoint, not from a substance.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, so that, there was an acknowledgement there. So they've gone in that direction, where Duke has gone in the direction of no longer scoring essays according to, proper use of grammar, syntax, all that, just knowing that because so much stuff is being done, if it's not AI, it's somebody's proofing it, and is like, we just can't count that. We just can't count on the fact that we're seeing your work.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of different
I have to say, there
perspectives.
are some times when you open up a file and like you start putting time into reviewing it. And then by the time you get to the supplemental essay or to the regular essay, like there are some times when I'll spend all this time reviewing a file and then I get to the supplemental essay and it's one sentence. And I've essentially just wasted time reviewing the rest of that file. So if there were an opportunity to have AI be able to look through that and score that and say, this student didn't answer the question at all. They made a one sentence answer for what's supposed to be 300 words. That would clue me in not to spend so much time on the rest of the file, because you're not going to be admitted to a place like CC or a highly selective institution if you don't take the supplemental essay seriously. So
how often times a year would you have someone do a one sentence? Would it be more than 10? Double digits?
Yes. In rate, it doesn't happen so much in early action. It almost never happens in early decision, but in regular action, perhaps because we don't have an application fee and students will just apply because we don't charge a fee, and they don't actually want to do the application. They're not actually interested in coming here. I don't know why they apply, but it's frustrating when you have this big queue of applications to read, and there are students who are really not serious. Like, to be able to sort through those and say, okay, we're going to take a quick look at this, but I don't need to put in a lot of time trying to identify, how they're spending their time outside of class or spending a lot of time reading their essay. Because sometimes their personal essay, you read it and you think, oh, this is a great essay. And then you get to the supplement and it's one sentence and you're like, well, why did I spend my time working on that? Because I can't admit the student. And
that speaks to another thing. In general, students they think the personal statement is longer. It goes to everybody. Therefore, it's more important.
Yeah.
And, that custom prompt, that's the one time you're speaking directly to the school.
Yeah.
And
it's really important.
Really, really important. I mean,
so it could be helpful to have a way to sort of sort through those to begin with, so that you sort of know what you're getting into before you open the file.
Here's another.
We still will read it, but you can move through it a little bit more quickly.
Here's another angle. So I just got back from the SACAC conference, which is like we have these conferences all around the country in regions for professional development for counselors and admission officers. And there was a lot on AI, as there has been now for at least 3 years in a row. But I was attending a session with several, kind of senior level admissions people. And somebody asked a question like, why would you not use AI? They were talking about for making decisions. And one of the things that the rep said, of course, they talked about the human component. There's always going to be the human component that no system will fully capture. And everybody feels very strongly about that. There's not anybody that I know that doesn't feel strongly about that. But then he brought up something else, which was really interesting. And I can see this. It's like, we also have to take into consideration how the public thinks. And the public would not like it at all to find out that we were using AI to make admissions decisions. That would blow up in our face. So that's also a factor we have to think about when we decide how far we want to go embracing this. Anything you want to say on that, Hillary?
Yeah, and as a person who has used AI a decent amount, like both in my personal life and for writing or at least brainstorming on the comms side at CC, I mean, I see how often it makes mistakes, right? It's creating stuff out of thin air, and so I wouldn't trust it to make decisions, and I would be skeptical of any school that's letting it make decisions. Maybe except for in the case of like where, you know, a transcript has several F's on it, where there's nothing in that essay, where the student hasn't written a supplement. Like,
Sure.
I don't know, perhaps that's not a real problem to have AI making those decisions. But when it comes to students who are in the other 80% of the students we read who have, the academic background to be admitted and who are doing their best on their writing and who've done a good job with that, with the activities section, like, I don't think you want right now, not at least in 2025, you don't want a computer making those decisions.
Yeah, so great question, Anonymous. I mean, I just want to close by saying that we're going to have to keep coming back to this space because it is moving and moving fast.
Yeah.
And maybe...
And I think it'd be really interesting. I know your listeners are going to visit lots of schools. Like, I think it's a fair question to ask at the end of an info session. Can you tell us how your office is using AI in admission decisions? It'd be super interesting to sort of crowdsource from people what they're hearing from reps.
Yeah, and I love how Hillary phrased that. The how you're using would be better than saying, are you using? You know, it's that open-ended question that would bring out the details. So, yeah, we'll revisit this space. I'll most likely be bringing you an interview on this topic, in the not too distant future, how one school is doing it and doing it unabashedly because they said to me, that's a topic I would like to address. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, as long as someone doesn't throw out something that, like, so many people have said to me, I want to talk about the importance of match and fit. Well, I'm all about match and fit, but I can't give you guys 9 interviews on the importance of fit and match. So
right.
That's a hot topic that mission officers feel very strongly about. So understandably so. Yeah, all good. Thanks, Hillary. Thanks, Anonymous. Thanks, Anonymous.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hey, Susan, you ready for another question from a listener?
I sure am, Mark.
Great. Well, the next voice we're going to hear is from Barry from New Jersey, and he has a question about dual enrollment with general physics and how selective colleges see dual enrollment. So the question and get your thoughts, Susan.
Hi, Mark and team. This is Barry from New Jersey, and I have a dual enrollment question for y'all. My daughter, a junior this year, is already taking calculus, AP Calc AB, and assuming that she gets a good score on her AP exam, will be eligible to take some dual enrollment classes in her senior year. In particular, she's really interested in taking General Physics 1. The question I had was really to try to understand, how do the really selective colleges treat that? If she takes general physics and then maybe takes calculus 2 in the spring semester of her senior year, is that okay? Or will that show maybe less rigor than trying to take physics and calculus 2 at the same time so that she might complete maybe a full year of physics in her senior year? That seems pretty aggressive to me, and I think we would probably caution against it. But I wanted to understand maybe how the most selective colleges would treat that or kind of consider that. Thanks so much. Love the podcast, and thank you.
Hey, Barry. Hello, New Jersey. I read a lot of applications from New Jersey this year just because the university that I work with is very popular there. But that said, I love this question about dual enrollment because I think first of all, there's been a real proliferation of dual enrollment. I think high schools, public high schools especially, are seeing dual enrollment as a way to augment their curriculum, right? Where it used to be the high school had to offer everything, or not, and often some students were dissatisfied with what their options were.
The other thing too, Susan, people are wising up to the fact that, especially for public schools, you can go and take a dual enrollment class and oftentimes come in with college credit, where with the AP, you need to hit a certain score in order to get college credit.
But that's a bad assumption, though, for a family to have, because that's a level of research that you've got to do, students and parents,
Is school
because
school?
there are a lot of universities out there that won't give any credit for dual enrollment,
Sure.
or they'll only give it when it's for coursework that did not count toward the high school diploma.
Yeah.
There are a lot of variations on this theme that I find very, very confusing.
There are, and especially true. I find that's especially true with private schools and more selective schools. But even still, there's variation. But in general, like I find public schools are more likely, even flagships, to get
Yes,
credit for dual enrollment than selective privates.
right.
I mean, case in point is my two kids. One went to UGA, one went to Davidson. Davidson had that policy. We're not double crediting something. Counted it for your high school, counting it for college. UGA's got a very generous dual. That's just one example.
And I think a standard assumption is that a college won't give credit for a course that is not offered in their curriculum, right? So a student, for example, who took a I'm just making this up, but a dual enrollment class in finite math, maybe something like that. Even though it earned them that college dual enrollment credit, that a university that does not offer discrete math may not give that anything. When I was the transfer coordinator at Bates many years ago, I did all the credit evaluations, and the general rule was if the course isn't offered or something similar in our curriculum at the college, then we couldn't give credit for it, because credit means it's going to count toward earning your college diploma and possibly even fulfilling requirements toward that diploma. So there are a couple things that families have to watch out for. It doesn't sound like that's an issue for Barry and his child, that we're talking here about, physics, calculus.
The hardest part I had with this question is, this is common. We get this all the time. Sometimes people just say, how do colleges?
Right.
Barry said selective colleges, but the problem is they're also different. So that
I know.
I don't think we can give an answer. This is how selective colleges will look at general physics from dual enrollment. The mindset is it's a question that I like to talk to people about, like when I'm talking to them individually and I'm meeting with admission officers, whether I'm meeting on a school visit or a NACAC fair, or even if I'm talking to them before I go on air on a podcast interview. I like to ask them these questions, but I get very different answers from different schools. And just saying selective is not enough for us to say, okay, let's give the inside scoop. This is how it works, because among
Right.
selective schools, the policies are all over the place.
I think you're absolutely right. And, he gave us a couple of scenarios here, and I immediately had like 5 follow-up questions that I would ask.
Well, why don't you share some of your follow-ups? Share some of your follow-ups. That might be
Well, like I wanted to know that if he referred to dual enrollment, 12th grade, first semester general physics 1, is that an algebra or a calculus-based physics class? The colleges differentiate in the rigor of that.
Definitely.
Right. Are they substituting these classes for AP or IB or advanced coursework at the high school? Sometimes dual enrollment, to me, when I read an application, looks like an avoidance in a way of what could have been a more rigorous option at the high school. Or it could be the other way around. It could be, well, they don't offer me this at my high school. Well, in that case, great. But colleges are always going to look at what was offered at the high school. What options did the student have? How did they kind of make their way through the high school curriculum, taking advantage of coursework across the curriculum, as well as courses that played. If Barry's son is an engineering applicant, he should have calculus-based physics. In high school, that's usually the second year of physics. There's too much I don't know here to give specific information, and is the dual enrollment giving this student an option to excel beyond what was available to the student, in which case it's very much admired. It's reaching for the stars, and colleges like to see that. It's called ambition, right? If it's substituting in certain ways, it can actually dumb down the rigor of what could have been taken at the high school. But I don't want anyone to assume that. But what I sometimes see with kids in dual enrollment is they're taking a class like, what's an example? Sociology, and not that I don't think sociology is rigorous, but it looks to me like dual enrollment is a proxy for what could have been a more rigorous course at the high school. And, dual enrollment, are they actually going to the community college? Sometimes that is the case. Or is this just a curriculum in a box that's being given to a high school teacher by the community college? So am I interested in that? I want to know. I mean, I think for kids who, like, I worked with a student this year, this short example, who did 2 community college classes in areas of study that her high school did not offer her. I can't remember what they were. They were in the social sciences, but they were beyond the high school curriculum. So she kept calling them dual enrollment, and I think they actually weren't. I think they were actually just extra community college courses. So to that point, make sure are you talking about courses that are going to be on your high school transcript? Are they going to be designated as college level? Because when I read an application, I want to know if this is a college level class that I should be considering equal to AP, IB, high honors. So there's a lot of information. Dual enrollment is awesome. I don't want you to get the feeling that I'm dissing it in any way, but it takes a lot of different forms. And high schools actually don't always do a very good job of showing what's what, and that can be to a student's disadvantage. So read your school's profile, take a look at a transcript as it will be sent to a college, make sure things are clearly identified, and use, if you feel they aren't, ask your counselor to unpack that in their recommendation letter that goes with the transcript, and in your Common App or Coalition in the additional information section, you may want to explain that a little more detailed.
When I'm in a situation like this, I will recommend to the student to talk to the school counselor to ask them what their perception of the course is, also how they'll be presenting it. And I like them, he's clearly mentioned that he's looking at very selective schools. What does the curriculum look like from that school, from students that are successfully applying to some more selective schools? And so those are conversations I like for them to have with their school counselor. Now, I get mixed reviews back when I do this. Sometimes people say, it's my third counselor this year or something like this, or they're brand new. Or, I mean, I've had parents tell me, I feel like, I listen to the podcast all the time. I'm not being disrespectful. I feel like I know more than the school counselor. So it's such a mixed bag versus sometimes you get someone that has been at the school for a while. All these high schools are all so different. Like, let's assume a public school, right? Sometimes it's the whole, A through D, F through H in the alphabet, and you're just assigned. And college counseling feels like a smaller piece of what they do. They're really doing crisis counseling and scheduling changes and logistics and administration and personal counseling. And then you get others that really defy that stereotype. Like, they take the college counseling part very seriously. Some of them are in our Counselor Connect group. They're the public counselors in there. They're listening to podcasts. They're going to offer professional development. And they're just a treasure trove because they have local school knowledge, and they really are really sharpening their skills all the time. And so I feel like sometimes I'm speaking to a total mixed bag when I tell people to go to their school counselor, but it's still worth doing. And, I can't guarantee that they'll be a fountain of knowledge, but sometimes they are. A lot of times they are. What are your thoughts on that, Susan?
Oh, I agree. And I think what a student can do is, after talking with their counselor, write out the information that they feel it would be important for that counselor to include in the letter that accompanies the transcript. And, just descriptive, clear description, referencing the profile. If the profile is not clear, like, for example, some high schools will show you on the GPA weighting part of the profile, they'll say, dual enrollment gets this weighting, AP gets this, IB gets that. They'll actually give the hierarchy of weighting, which is a pretty big giveaway.
Sure.
Normally, it's probably the same weighting boost for,
That's the most common.
Right. But it's really important for a student to look at that. How is my curriculum being explained to the colleges? And then give the counselor some help with a short couple of sentences or a paragraph that of what's not being said that would be helpful, to them. If Barry's child was not able to take a course because of a conflict in the high school that would have elevated the student into a higher level, which is why the dual enrollment is coming in to kind of save the day senior year. Or this course isn't available in the high school and my daughter's ready for multivariable calculus or whatever. That should be said. And just hand it to the counselor.
This is a great question to email a college. It has to be from the student.
Mm-hmm.
This is better than overwhelming majority of questions that they're asked, or to talk at a fair. A lot of times, if it's if not a parent or an alumni, but if they're sending in a true admissions rep, they're usually going to send a territory manager. Is this a really good question to do? And if you send it in, of course, this has to be the student, not the parent. But if the student's sending this question in by email, I'm trying to pick some courses right now, and these are my choices, and I'm very interested in your school. I've been doing this with my students. I've been very pleased with the level of honesty that they're getting, because think about it from an admissions standpoint. This is somebody, if I was a sales talk, you would call this a hot lead. Like, they're reaching out and saying they're interested in our school.
Right.
And we know curriculum matters, especially, the more you move up the selectivity tier, the more curriculum matters. And now they're asking me a question. I don't want to misguide them with bad advice and give them advice that's going to hurt them in our reading process. So I've been doing this with my students, and they've been reporting back, and I've been quite pleased with the level of transparency that they're getting. When they'll say we might, they'll always have some nuance in there because they don't know everything either. But I've been pleased with the advice that my students have been getting when they reach directly out to colleges with these curriculum type questions.
I think that's great. Do you encourage them to include a transcript?
Well, yes, including a transcript is good. Sometimes I've just had them kind of say, this was my grade, but I probably should emphasize attaching a transcript more so than I have.
Or at least give enough information, because as an admission person, I would never give advice.
Sure.
About, you should take, Calc 2, you should take BC calculus at the high school instead of,
Sure.
Physics 1. I would never give advice that specific without knowing, first of all, what is the student interested in studying in college? And I would need to see the course record leading up to that and the level of achievement.
Well, a lot of the times it's more like, I've got a choice between this class and this class. Both of them fit my schedule, and look, would these classes be perceived differently from a rigor standpoint at your school? So it's been more of that kind of question, and it's kind of a good read, because if a school really does have a preference, I find they don't want to give bad advice to a kid.
Right. But you might not get a very specific answer. If it's a question like, can I take AP psychology instead of another social science class? An admissions person might get back and say, well, actually, we count AP Psychology is a science class.
Sure.
It's not a social science class. So if that means you're only going to have 2 social science credits, you may be in jeopardy because we require or highly recommend 3. So, things like that are, the misunderstanding about AP Psychology is a very good one to straighten out.
No.
With an
A
admissions
lot.
person.
Is it science or a social science?
But I think a question like, do you have to have calculus-based physics to be a successful engineering candidate? Absolutely. An admissions officer should be able to comment on that, right off the top of their head.
Another thing is like, a lot of times students will, they're trying to decide stats, versus another class or anatomy. This is one that's come up recently.
Right. All the time.
Reaching out to Case Western Reserve over AP physics versus anatomy or physiology. And the response that came back for nursing majors, they are very happy to have someone do anatomy or physiology as a nursing major. But that's very school specific.
But if they had physics earlier in high school. So, my sense about this, Mark, is after a student has had the 3 core sciences in high school,
and you're talking about
they can do anything they want to explore their particular interest. But I would be very worried about a nurse, especially at a direct entry, highly selective nursing program, substituting something else as their 3rd science and not taking physics in high school. Because first of all, they're going to get killed in physics in college. But take both. From my perspective, you'll be a stronger candidate if you have, if it's plus, not a substitute.
I just think sometimes people don't realize that admission officers are there to reach out and to
Absolutely.
ask these kinds of questions too, and
right.
I remember Ashley from Ohio, she shared this on our 500th episode with the tip, and I was really appreciative. She used to do grad school admissions at Ohio State, and now counseling is, I wish I could remember the term she used. I really liked it. It was not admission officers don't bite, but it was something, that was very endearing. And she made a point like they are there to help you.
Yeah, that's right.
And please take advantage of contacting them directly when you have these kinds of, I remember when I interviewed Fabrizio on about UTK, and we were having a conversation about SAR. So, SAR can be very confusing to me as a counselor.
Do you mean the self-reported academic record?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I said, I just tell my parents when I have a SAR question to go directly to you. He's like, this is exactly what we want you to do. Come to us, ask us that. I've had good success with that. And what better place to do than to go directly to the school? They're going to be able to answer the question better than I can. And a lot of times I find schools that have it, they know it's confusing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have people there prepared to answer those SAR questions. That's just one that popped into my head because, I brought that up on the podcast. He's like, by all means, please have anybody ask us directly. We'll get back to you with a very specific answer. Now,
well, and they'd much rather have you do it right the first time,
correct,
rather than have to make a correction later. Kids can accidentally hurt themselves by leaving things out of the self-reported academic record, and if they had asked a question, they would have represented themselves. Because sometimes I'll look at a draft of an application and even the Common App academic report, and I'll say, wait a minute, didn't you take, thus and so during the summer? I wrote it on your transcript. Oh, yeah. Those things really matter.
I know. And once again, the more you move up that selectivity tier, curriculum is important. It's important.
It is. And, I remember at the school where we both worked, Mark, when we switched to a physics first curriculum, moved physics for all students to 9th grade, and the sequence went physics, chemistry, biology. Now that was algebra-based physics in 9th grade, right? And then I remember talking to the University of Pennsylvania, bouncing this off of them. And they said, well, that's awesome for STEM applicants, including engineers, but they've got to have calculus-based physics for engineering. They won't even move further in our reading. I think that was a little bit of an extreme answer.
Let me tell you an experience that I had. So I have a student who's at UPenn right now in engineering. Obviously, you're bright as a whip to get into that program. And I don't know if the student had never had a non-A in her life, but she was getting a C.
Wow.
And so the family reached out to me. And to make a long story short, through a family connection, they got tutoring for her from somebody who is a TA at Northwestern in the same engineering discipline.
Ah.
And the TA said, I cannot believe they are teaching this to first-year students. This is graduate level stuff, and I don't even know some of these answers to this.
Ooh.
So that's what they're when you hear them say we need to have calculus-based physics, they know about what they're about to, be exposed to.
Wow, what an interesting story.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Susan, this is awesome. Love talking to you as always. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome, and good luck to Barry and his family.
Barry.
And thanks to the generosity of the Princeton Review for sending in that SpeakPipe question, you are going to get your choice of one of the following 4 books: College Admissions 101, Essays That Kicked Apps, The Best 390 Colleges, Princeton Review Digital SAT Prep. Now, in order to get your book, you just need to send me an email at mark@schoolmatch4u.com, put Princeton Book Giveaway in the subject line, and in the body of the email, put the title of the book you want and put the episode number where we discussed your question, and just share a brief description of the question that you asked.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, it's time for part 3 of 4 of my interview with Nate Haveman, VP of Enrollment at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. In part 3, Nate tells us why he is so impressed with President Scoggin. Nate tells us about the Racquet Sports Management program that Hope offers. Nate tells us about the most popular majors at Hope. Nate tells us about what it means that Hope is a colleges that change lives school. Nate talks about the outstanding art, music, dance, and theater programs at Hope. Nate answers the question, would a student who is not a Christian fit in at Hope? Nate talks about the political affiliation of the students at Hope. Nate talks about who are the small colleges that they have the most overlaps with. Nate talks about what are the things that make a student stand out and pop when he's reading an admissions file. And Nate explains why students pick Hope over their cross apps. Listen and enjoy.
Now, the mom I was telling you about is very impressed with President Scoggin and his leadership. What can you tell us about President Scoggin?
Yeah, so President Scoggin came a few years ago, and it was like a tornado. I mean, he's a non-traditional, I would call him a non-traditional, as I am too, I suppose, in higher ed. He's a non-traditional president. He's 45, maybe, 44, 45. I think the average age for college presidents is like mid-60s. And not that age is everything at all, but I think it's worth noting. And he comes from he doesn't come necessarily from academia. He got his master's at Harvard after coming through Hope. But so he's done that. He's walked that path. But he was in government for a number of years, and then the private sector as well. Worked at the New York Stock Exchange, and he came back. He felt a call. We talked about call a second ago. He was actually on the board of trustees at Hope for a few years, and we had an outgoing president, and he felt a call to apply. He can't really explain it. It's a fun story if you ever want to hear it. But and he just said, "Well, I'm gonna apply, and we'll see where it goes." And he just kept moving forward, and he is some of the things that come to mind with him. He's so positive. He loves students. I can't imagine a better Instagram follow for a president of a college than President Scoggin. I mean, he's constantly with students. He eats in the dining hall with students, just sort of plops down, I would say 3 days a week. I'm not sure the students like that, but it's life-giving to him. So he is a lot. He's everywhere, and I think the students just desperately love him. He's authentic. He's relatable. He lives right on campus with his family. He's got I could almost see it from here, his house on campus. And so he's just such a part of the community, to the point where they have 2 dogs, Mark, and they named the 2 dogs Albertus. He goes by Albie. That's the founder of Hope College, was Albertus Van Raalte. And then Phil is named after Philip Phelps, who's the first president of Hope. So
wow,
he jokes all the time, like
he's all in.
We're all in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's been very fun to work with for me, just to see his leadership, certainly, and his passion for hope. And again, we talked about innovative earlier. He is really thinking differently about higher education.
Like Hope Forward was his brainchild, wasn't it? Was that
That's
his
correct.
idea?
Yeah. I mean, he comes from the
That's
private
proof.
sector. That's proof.
That's proof right there. Yeah, that's really outside the box thinking there.
Yeah, it's a big swing. And so, yeah, he is super innovative and very fun to work for.
So I'm going to call our listener Jay, which is actually the initial of her first name. But Jay wanted me to ask about the Racquet Sports Management Program. She really likes this program. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, she knows so much about Hope because we just started this program within the last year. We've had a professional tennis management program for the last, I'm going to say, 3 years. And that's a pretty unique program already. There's only a few of those in the country. But Hope is one of a handful of schools with Racquet Sports Management. It's a minor right now. Started in, I guess, the fall of 25, so 6 months ago, perhaps. It's the big one. We have on campus, I think this was born out of, we have a wonderful tennis facility already, an indoor that existed when I was a student. I would play weekly against he's not here anymore, but the athletic director of Hope, Ray Smith. He was like 70 years old, Mark, when I would play him in tennis.
Oh, wow.
And he would beat me.
Jeez.
I'm 18.
That's
I'm
some humble pie.
That's some humble pie. He'd stand in one spot and he'd just paint the corners. And I was running, all over, sweating,
wow,
and he was not breaking a sweat. So we have a wonderful indoor tennis facility, and then we built, with, again, a generous donation, a beautiful outdoor facility. And so a lot of students come to Hope for tennis. And so it was born out of that. We have a really strong program there. So Racquet Sports, I would say most students who are doing that would major in something. Could be anything. I would say most of the time, if I was broad brushstrokes, I would say it's business or comm. And then they would pair that with the Racquet Sports minor. And a lot of those students want to either continue that and want to teach at a club in the future, or they just want to have access to tennis as they did in high school and things like that. Tons of paid internships. I was talking to Adam Ford, who's the director of that program, I guess a couple months ago when he came to present to our team. And he said we have a 100% placement rate for jobs, which is unheard of in most fields. And then a 70% have an offer before they even graduate of students in that program. And it's a minor currently. That's a minor. So we have students in Northern Michigan, Midland Dow is big for tennis in the area, East Side, Chicago. We've got students everywhere. And of course, they go down to Florida every year for U.S. Open type stuff. I don't think the U.S. Open is there, but that's where the facility is.
And Jay also wanted me to talk to you about the fact that Hope is a Colleges That Change Lives school. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah. Have you heard of Colleges That Change Lives?
Yes. I used to go to their fair all the time. And I mean, they've been around forever.
Yeah, they've been around forever, like the mid-'90s. Probably Lauren Pope wrote this book. Yeah. And basically for me, Colleges That Change Lives, I've been to a lot of those fairs too. Maybe we were crossing paths. I was working for Hope and you were out there.
This was I was in Pennsylvania at the Westtown School, and one of our other co-hosts, Susan Tree, the two of us would take students every year to, the representatives would be there. It was good. It was great.
Yeah. The students, I mean, for someone that goes to a lot of college fairs, those college fairs were by far the best that we ever went to. Those CTCL, we call it CTCL fairs. The students that came to those, they came with a notebook. And they came with question upon question upon question. They had done their research. That's who kind of knows about Colleges That Change Lives. So this book came out in the late mid-'90s, and it was a grouping at the time of about 40 schools, liberal arts schools who were doing things differently, is what I would say, who might not be ranked in the top 20. Some are, might not be ranked that high, but they are unique in their offerings that they're providing. They're unique in the way that they're doing it and how they're seeing students. And so often you run across this, I'm sure, in your work, so many of the schools, it's like if you don't have name brand recognition, then no one knows about you. No one knows about Hope. And that doesn't mean Hope's not a tremendous school. It just means you don't know about us yet. And colleges that change lives has allowed Hope to be surfaced in a lot of these communities. And I usually will talk about, you're a Michigan State guy. If my sister wears a Michigan State sweatshirt through the airport,
I know.
No one's going to talk to her because it could be anybody. It could be a fair weather fan, could be an alum. They could have gotten the shirt somewhere at a store. They like the colors. But if you wear a Hope shirt, a Hope College shirt in any airport, everywhere, anywhere, if there's anyone who sniffs that out, they will stop you and say, what's your connection to Hope? Like, tell me, I had a friend that went to Hope. They loved it. Or I went to Hope. Or my sister's thinking about going to Hope. Whatever it is, there's this connection. And I think colleges that change lives surfacing how great Hope is or that we're doing it differently is a piece of it. But it also goes back to the experience that students have while they're students on campus is different. So in the admissions office, I mentioned earlier this idea of being personalized versus personal. And my daughter is a freshman this year at Hope. And so the last couple of years, she was receiving mail every day. And the marketing budget for these colleges is just astronomical. I mean, she's getting something in the mail every day. Name, we think you'd be great at our school. Here's why. But it's very generic. That's personalized. That's personalized. Hope strives to be personal. So we write a lot of handwritten notes. We do a lot of meetups for coffee and that sort of a thing because we know that the experience that students have while they're students here is going to be personal, not personalized. And so we try to just be a piece of that in the front end to show students what it could be like. And so colleges that change lives feels like is kind of like tangential to that for me.
Now, I know Hope has a nationally recognized dance and theater program, and you host the prestigious Hope Summer Repertory Theater. What can you tell us about these programs at Hope?
Yeah, I would loop in. Hope is the first private 4-year undergraduate liberal arts college in the country to be accredited in art, music, dance, and theater.
Nice.
So we've been investing in those 4 areas for a long time. So I wouldn't probably just say the dance and theater. I'd probably add in art and music too. We just built a beautiful music facility. My daughter's in choir, so of course I'm a big fan of those programs. But yeah, the dance, we just built a new dance wing. I mean, that's how much we're putting into these areas in a time where so many schools are dropping the arts. Like those are the first programs at many schools to be shuttered. I would say like you see a lot of theater and music and dance and art going by the wayside and then keeping these other, maybe pre-professional programs. And at Hope, we're not doing that. We are heavily invested in making sure that when students are here, they're being pulled in a bunch of different directions to learn, truly to learn, to be curious and to see life from a different perspective. So yeah, theater, Hope Rep Theater is super fun. They do 6, 7 shows, different productions a summer. I don't know what the slate is. It might be 4 or 5 this summer. I can't remember what it is, but super fun. There's usually a kids show. Get a lot of community members that come for that. We bring in a lot of folks from outside of the community too, who actually act and do the directing for Hope Rep Theater. That's the summer program.
So let's talk about your mission statement. So Nate, your first 5 words say Hope is a Christian community. So if someone does not identify as Christian, is it fair to say that Hope is not the college for them?
No. Great question. Leading the witness, Your Honor. No, I don't think so. Everything at Hope is going to be. Have you been to campus before?
No, I have not.
Okay,
but I'm very, very curious to get there.
We will get you here. I'll host you on campus. Everything at Hope outside of academics is going to be invitational. So kids should go to class, and the classes that they're going to, they're going to take a wide breadth of things from math and science to religion to the arts. I took ceramics, music, whatever it is, the humanities. But everything else is invitational. And so I've mentioned the term vibrantly Christian or some form of that a few times. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was my favorite thing about Hope when I was a student. Like that, for me, that was central to my time here. But it wasn't necessarily central to like even my roommates' time, the different roommates that I had. That was not the main thing for them, and that's okay. But a good way for me to kind of talk about that is we have chapel Monday, Wednesday, Friday during the week, and then Sunday nights. Now, chapel is completely optional. If a student wants to go, great. If they don't want to go, no one's standing there with a clipboard, marking off names and saying, like, you got to go a certain number of times. There's no faith statement at Hope. However, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10:30 to 10:50, it's 10:52, it's a 22-minute service. The chapel holds about 1,500 kids, and it's standing room only. It is wild that no one has to be there. They could be studying or video games or coffee or sleeping, napping, whatever the thing that they want to do is. And 1,500 of them are trudging their way through the snow when it's cold, and they're coming, when it's hot, and they're coming when they're busy, and they're coming when they're not busy. And they're congregating in the chapel for student-led worship. And so it's definitely a part of the fabric of Hope that I loved, and I think so many students find value in. Does that mean a student who's not a Christian is not going to feel welcome? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I don't think so. I think it's a community where there's going to be well-meaning people on all sides of any number of issues, as the world is right now. But Hope is still fighting to be a place where we can have hard conversations. And one of those hard conversations generally is like, some of it involves the church and religion, and some of it involves politics and social issues. And I think having all of that on the table is super healthy. So Hope is vibrantly Christian, Mark. I love that about it. There's tons of Bible studies and immersion trips that's over spring break where students can go serve, and the chapel program, as I mentioned. But some students might not interact with a lot of that either, and that's okay.
What would the political affiliation be with most of the students, would you say?
Tough to say. I try not to ask because that one's a hot button issue for me, just personally.
I know. I'm sure you didn't want me to even ask you, but I threw it out there.
Yeah. So I think I'm guessing it's pretty down the middle. There are going to be people on both sides. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think as it goes with 18 to 22-year-olds, sometimes they're easier to talk to. And granted, I'm talking to them in person, and I'm not seeing the stuff on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. But I think when students are willing to be in a room together and have discussions, good things generally happen. So whether that's political issues or social issues, I think we're striving to be a place where you can have civil dialogue, civil discourse. And Mark, that's missing in the world today. That's dropping off quick. So
I know from our communication earlier, Nate, that University of Michigan, Michigan State, and Grand Valley State are your big, large school overlaps. Yep. But who are your small college overlaps?
Yeah, great
question.
Meaning,
people that apply to you also apply to these schools.
Yeah, anecdotally, I would say Albion, which is in Michigan, like a Loyola Chicago, like a Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
Calvin.
Kalamazoo.
Yep. Kalamazoo. Thanks. Hillsdale, Butler. Those would be some that immediately come to mind. Kind of in the smaller, some are much smaller and some are a little bit bigger than us, but that would be.
And some of those are Michigan too, based.
And some are Michigan. Yep.
What about like a Wheaton or Cedarville or some of those places? Grove City. Do you have overlap? There's a lot of Christian schools out there. I don't know, Belmont, even Point Loma. There's a lot all over the country.
I have talked with people all in the last 10 days who have mentioned all the schools you just mentioned.
Wow.
I wouldn't say they're in the top. They wouldn't be the most that we see. But
sure, because there's also some geographic probably to this as well.
Exactly. Students from Chicago may be more interested in Wheaton than some other school, and students from Cincinnati might be more interested in Belmont or Lipscomb or something like that.
Lipscomb, yeah.
Yep. And then
what about Samford? Do you ever hear them as well?
Yeah, when I was recruiting, I lost a bundle of kids to Samford and Belmont and got salty about it. I didn't want to do it, but but I did. So I would say those are the biggest crosshalves, but I'm grateful that we have a pretty broad footprint for a smaller school. For a smaller school.
So when you're looking at admissions, besides taking challenging courses and doing well in them, what are some other things that when you're reading a file make an applicant pop? I'm sure alignment with the mission could be one.
Yep. Missional alignments is excellent. I personally love to see students who have a job. That one's just, again, a personal one for me. I think students who are able to, and that job could be like taking care of their siblings. That's fine. Please write it down. I think that's a huge commitment to make. Those who are in athletics or the arts, I think those are students that I just think, oh man, at Hope you can do dance and be on the pre-med track At Hope, you can, play the viola and study engineering. Like you're not force fed, like put into these areas or put into a box because of the thing you want to study. You gotta be conscious of how much time is in the day. But I think the students that pop for me, to use your language, are the ones who are involved. And through that involvement, you can see some sort of a tie to helping others. And those are the students that generally find great success, not just at Hope, but in life, because they put others first.
Go back to this overlap school question again. So students apply to Hope, and they apply to a lot of your competitors, and they select you. What are the reasons your surveys or anecdotal feedback indicate why they tell you that they picked you over the many other options they had?
Yeah, I mean, when you visit, I think you'll feel it. That's a piece of it, the head-heart combo. I think you'll feel it. I think, selfishly, I think the admissions office does as well as we can to showcase the true Hope College, to ask students to be bold in their questions, not of the people in the admissions office who are tasked with the sale of Hope, but of anyone that they meet at Hope or at home, to say, what have you heard? What do you like? What do you not like? So I think there's an authenticity that students do find meaningful. And then we have such a wide variety of programs that a lot of students are like, oh man, even if I don't know that I'm for sure that I want to be a nurse, even if I'm not sure that that's my way, if that's not my path, I know that there's so many other options for me at Hope. We're a large enough school, we're a smaller school with a lot of opportunities.
Well, 3,200 is, there are a lot of 12, 14, 16, 18 to 2,000. And someone might think 2,000, 3,200, what's the difference? It's a big difference. It's 60% more kids, It's a big difference.
I need you to be on some calls with me, with parents. I'm constantly saying that. I mean, with 3,200 students, you have a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of things to be involved in. And we have the resources then also to have stunning research facilities. In the library that I'm sitting in to do this podcast, the field house, as I mentioned earlier, or the different practice fields, all that stuff, it starts to pile up, I think, for students, where they see like, oh man, there's not a lot that I don't like about Hope, and I think I could be really successful there. Probably the elephant in the room is if prospective students talk to faculty, or if prospective students talk to current students, our yield percentage goes through the roof, because generally speaking, faculty and students who are here have nothing but good things to say about their experience, that they're being pushed out of their comfort zones, that they're being supported when they need it. It's certainly not all rainbows and sunshine, because this is college, and college is going to be hard, and you're going to oversleep, and you're going to have bad days. You're going to wake up to a tear-soaked pillow. Like, all those things are true. But Hope is a what then school for me. Like, that's what I'll often say to families. When those time comes, what then? Like, how is your school going to support you when that happens, when you have a bad day? And Hope has done that for decades, Mark. I mean, just that's a piece of this. And I think families, for sure, I don't know if students, but families definitely find great value in that support.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Nate Haveman, VP Enrollment at Hope College. We hope you join us next week for the next segment. On Monday's episode, I'm going to share a few more insights from my Texas trip I think will be of interest to you. And I'm going to share a couple insights I gleaned from the counseling room. And just so you know, friends, these listeners gave me permission to share these conversations with the counseling room with you guys. And then we'll have John Pollard, Dean of Frankie Honors College. Last week he was talking about U of A. Now he's talking about the Frankie Honors College. And you'll hear him over the next 2 weeks. And friends, I can never say this enough. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. And I believe that with every fiber of my being. See you Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the YourCollegeBoundKid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Escabel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegebounkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.